Slums are an eyesore. They annoy people. They sometimes evoke pity, sympathy, disgust, and anger. But the idea of discussing this topic here is to talk about things that many people don't know. All the data that we talk about in this presentation has been sourced from the census of 2011. Why 2011? Because after 2011 there has been no census. All the data that we've got is from a document the census authorities brought out on the slums of India. And the data is quite shocking. You realize that slums are being created by politicians. You realize that slums are being created by people who want to make money from slums in two ways. One is getting money from the slum dwellers in a variety of ways, and the second is through land grab and the real estate development that subsequently takes place. Indian courts have also contributed because the Indian courts allow slum resettlement at the very place where the slums were created. Therefore, if I want to build my house 20 years later in the most affluent parts of Bombay, I would have to go to the slum lord, pay him some money to allow me to build a hut in, let's say, Malabar Hill or Cuff Parade or wherever. And once I've settled there for more than 5 years, I become a registered slum dweller and I'm entitled to a flat in the same area where the slum dweller lives. But there are other numbers that are important. Look at the census numbers. National population growth between 2001 and 2011 was 17% over a decade. But slum population growth overall was 25%. Now there's a difference between 17% and 25%. And when you take urban slums, you find that the growth of slums in urban areas was 30%. 17%, 25%, 30%. Let's go a step further. And then you find that when it came to households in slums, the figure is laughable or alarming, the way you want to look at them. At the national level, households grew by 37%. Now, there's a problem. If slums grew by 25%, how could households grow by 35%? Something doesn't make sense. And when you take at urban slums grew 30%, but households in urban areas grew at a mind-boggling 44%. And when you look at children in slums, you find that the population of children grew only by 13%. Now look at the funny thing. National growth of population, 17%. Slum population, 25%. Urban slum population, 30%. And when it comes to households, you find that households grew by 37% and urban households grew by 44%. Why did the children not grow that at the same rate? Slums procreate quite rapidly, and you have a large number of births taking place in slums. So where did the children go? And that is where you realize suddenly that even the parents realized that the slum is no place for a child to grow up. They send the children back to the villages where they grow up till they become adults, and then they come and form another slum. If that is shocking, let's take the last figure. National size of households was 5 people to 1 household. In urban slums, the size of the household was just 0.5. 5 for the country, 0.5 for the slums, which means each person belonged to 2 families, to 2 households. Which means that slums had 10 times more households than was required. What does that mean? It means only 2 things. 1, if I and my brother were staying together we have one household. I have a separate household alone. I have a third household from my brother alone. So one becomes free. When one becomes more, that is why you have 0.5. When you have 0.5 and you have households that are 10 times the number, it means 10 times the subsidies go there. So while a household gets a certain amount of electricity at discounted prices, by having 5 households, I get electricity from 5 different sources and I benefit at the cost of the taxpayer. So the taxpayer loses because the slums get land free of cost. They get buildings free of cost, built at taxpayer expense. They get subsidies free of cost, 10 times more than required at the taxpayer's cost. And why does this happen? Because slum lords, who then become politicians, know that by getting people together in a concentrated place, I get votes from these people. But more importantly, let's say I stay in an area where 100 people of my type stay. And suddenly a slumlord comes and brings in 200 people to stay where I'm staying. They are 200, I'm 20 or 100. And effectively, my vote gets marginalized. That man gets voted. My candidate does not get voted. You distort politics, you distort electoral rolls, and you distort the economy. Slums are a good way of making money at the taxpayer's expense. And so next time you see a slum, please remember it could be a politician who is behind them, incentivizing slum people to come and create a slum. That is why national population growth is 17%. Slum population was 25%. I'm looking for a job as much as he's looking for a job. So when I move from Ajmer to Bombay, I take a place on rent. But when the slum dweller moves from a village to Bombay, he goes and stays in a slum protected by the slum lord. And because he's protected and because he's promised a house in the most affluent of areas, that population grows faster than the rest of the population. And by dividing families and having 10 times more households than required, you have distorted economics also. And that is why India needs to rethink slums. I do not think the next census will allow these figures to come out again. That is why the 2011 census is very important, because they tell you what is wrong with a policy towards slums. Thank you for watching this. If you found this interesting, tell others about it. If you want to be informed about subsequent policy analysis that I do, please click the subscribe button and you will be reminded every time a podcast comes from this channel. More importantly, it's the best way to know what is happening to your country and to your money. That is important. Thank you.